Hello, and welcome to another episode of Perspectives from the Informed Perspective. We're Penny and Jenny, and if this is your first time tuning in, we're so glad you're here. This podcast is a space where we explore what it means to build strong, thoughtful communities grounded in our local lives and enriched by diverse perspectives from all around the world. We believe meaningful change starts with listening, really listening, to voices and experiences that challenge or expand our own. Today, we're diving into the subject of environment, a topic that affects every one of us. Every year, the headlines feel the same. Global temperatures rising, species disappearing, floods where fields once grew. In 2024, the world recorded the hottest year in history. Plastic waste continues to fill our oceans, and deforestation swallows the equivalent of 10 football fields every minute. The climate crisis spared no region this year. Hurricane Melissa swept through the Caribbean, Typhoon Kaimai devastated the Philippines, and torrential rains drowned communities in Vietnam. According to the World Meteorological Organization, 2025 is now set to be the second or third hottest year ever recorded. The past 11 years, 2015 to 2025, have been the hottest since record keeping began nearly 2 centuries ago. And it's not just the heat. Extreme weather events are becoming a new global constant. Oceans are warming, glaciers are melting, and the climate is shifting faster than many communities can adapt. A major new assessment, the State of Climate Action 225, delivers a stark verdict. Out of 45 indicators of climate progress, not a single one is on track to meet 2030 targets. Clea Schumer of the World Resources Institute warns, all systems are flashing red. Steady progress isn't enough anymore. Every year we fail to speed up, the gap widens, and the climb gets steeper. Electric vehicles, once a shining example of progress, now also face slowdowns in major markets like Europe and the United States. Public finance for fossil fuels has increased by an average of $75 billion a year since 2014, reaching over $1.5 trillion in 2023. Deforestation is rising again, and coal's share of electricity generation has barely budged. Air quality is another urgent concern. According to State of Global Air, 99% of people on Earth are exposed to levels of PM 2.5 pollution above the annual WHO guideline level of 5 micrograms per cubic meter. It's hard not to feel disheartened when governments stall, policies backtrack, and corporations make more promises than progress. Yet, amid these sobering challenges, there are pockets of progress. Renewable energy has tripled since 2015, making solar the fastest growing source of power in history. In 2023, renewable sources provide 30% of global electricity, up from 29% in 2022. And according to Ember in 2025, wind and solar outgenerated coal for the first time ever. Private climate finance surged from roughly $870 billion in 2022 to a record $1.3 trillion in 2023, while emerging technologies like green hydrogen and carbon removal saw some of their most significant one-year gains ever, with green hydrogen production quadrupling in a single year. We're living in a moment where the possibilities are enormous. Renewable energy, emerging technologies, new ways of thinking, the solutions are there. But they only work if we support them. And every year we delay, the challenge grows. It's overwhelming. It's easy to feel powerless. And yet one thing is absolutely certain. The next generation will inherit the consequences of our actions or our inaction. If we want them to step up and do better than we have, then we need to help them understand the gravity of what's happening without crushing their sense of hope. So maybe the real question is this: what if we stop waiting for governments or global powers to fix everything for us? Maybe real lasting change begins in smaller, more human places, in our homes, our schools, our local neighborhoods. This idea isn't new, but it does make me wonder, are we as individuals really stepping up? Because then the challenge becomes something deeper. How do we teach young people that the climate crisis is real, urgent, and serious, while also helping them believe that their actions can genuinely make a difference? How do we move people, especially the next generation, from fear or apathy to empowerment and hope? Today, we'll hear from some guests who are making it their mission to educate people about what can be done to protect our planet. Together, we'll explore what it really takes to help the next generation understand both the stakes and the possibilities, and how each of us can play a part in shaping a more hopeful and resilient future. Just before we do our introductions today, I'd like to add a few quotes. Gandhi said, "Earth provides enough to satisfy every man's needs, but not every man's greed." Henry David Thoreau in Familiar Letters, "What is the use of a house if you haven't got a tolerable planet to put it on?" Aldo Leopold in his book, A Sand County Almanac, "I am glad I will not be young in a future without wilderness." And Miss Christiana Pasca-Palma, the Executive Secretary of the Convention on Biological Diversity. "Our ancestors honored nature because they lived in and from nature. This is the type of connection we must preserve and pass on for our children and their children's children." Michael Crichton in the book Jurassic Park, "To the Earth, 1,000,000 years is nothing. This planet lives and breathes on a much vaster scale. We can't imagine its slow and powerful rhythms, and we haven't got the humility to try. If we're gone tomorrow, the Earth will not miss us." And attributed to George Monbiot and his article, "Earth Itself Has Become Disposable," progress is measured by the speed at which we destroy the conditions that sustain life. Attributed to David Suzuki, the Canadian geneticist, "We're in a giant car heading towards a brick wall, and everyone's arguing over where they're going to sit." And Haju Chang in 23 Things They Don't Tell You About Capitalism, "People overproduce pollution because they are not paying for the costs of dealing with it." So on that note, I'm going to pass to Jenny to introduce our wonderful panel of guests today.
Thank you, Penny. And this is such an important topic. And I think today's a really nice opportunity to think about how we educate and instill the urgency of this matter to the next generation. So first up, we've got Hugo Valdes-Vera, is the founder of Think Inc. CIC, an environmental organisation based in the UK with offices in several countries. Hugo's involvement began in 1992 when he and 5 friends co-initiated a movement to ban whale hunting in Antarctica. This endeavour eventually led to the establishment of the Antarctic Whale Sanctuary in 1995. Today, the organisation focuses on various environmental issues such as plastic pollution, deforestation and animal trafficking. Think Ocean also promotes education for sustainability in the UK. And Linus Owino is the founder and CEO of Marinas for Action MFA, leading community-driven marine conservation initiatives along Kenya's coast, focused on advancing climate adaptation, promoting economic empowerment for coastal communities, and driving science-based biodiversity preservation to ensure the long-term sustainability of marine ecosystems. Amalibo Tayala is the environmental educator and conservationist specialising in outdoor education, sustainability and community engagement. He is the founder and director of the Eco Community Project, promoting environmental awareness and empowering communities to live sustainably. With over 6 years of experience, Malibo is also the head mentor for outdoor education at St John's College, fostering youth development through experiential learning. A sports coach, mentor, and eternal optimist, he inspires others to create meaningful change, proving that passion, purpose, and community can overcome limited resources. What an inspiring panel, and let's hope that we get to hear all that inspiration today.
So I'd like to go to Hugo first today. And just before I jump into your question, I happened to be listening yesterday to a podcast. It was on the news on BBC. And a woman called Runa Khan, who's the founder and executive director of Friendship, was talking about the COP30. And just a quote really stood out for me, and I think it links quite nice into the question that we're about to ask you. She said something like this. She said, "Scientists are heard but not integrated. Civil society is heard but not integrated. So the people who actually make the decisions are the politicians and the companies." And I think that just captures it so well. And I'm interested to hear how that links into your question about the fact that potentially all voices aren't at the table when it comes to decision making for the environment. So moving to you, Hugo, you've been involved in environmental activism since the early 1990s. So from your perspective, why do we end up with so much conversation, so much powerful statements about climate and the environment, but still so little action that actually solves these problems?
Well, I'm very honest when I speak about these issues. The problem that we have is how we made the decisions and who made the decisions. You know, our generation, our politicians, our government, and everybody had control of the narrative or will take the responsibility of take a decision, a meaningful decision. We are all based by money and profits. So if you said to for example, to a government, we need to stop the plastic production or we need to decrease it by 20%, first, they will see if the company making the profit are funding the politicians. This is the real problem that we have. You know, the decision makers are part of the wheel of money. So if you say, this is a very clear example of what happened here in the UK. We have the number one investor in single-use plastic in the world, investing £30 billion to create new plastic, virgin plastic, but nobody knows, and we are not allowed to talk about who that is. Why? Because that organization funds the government and the political parties. So we know who they are. We mentioned on a live interview on BBC, and we've been banned from the BBC since. Because this is what happened. You can speak about the problem, but you cannot speak about the responsible part if it's linked with money, the government or the decision makers. So we are, for example, we're saying the Coca-Cola is, using 5 billion bottles a year. This is only on plastic example. 5 billion bottles a year. That is a huge amount. That's only Coca-Cola. Pepsi-Cola, all the other drinks, is just another few billions. But is Coca-Cola the responsible one? Coca-Cola don't make bottles. Coca-Cola is the end user of bottles. So if you say to Coca-Cola tomorrow, I'm really sorry, but the production will be only 1 billion next year. Coca-Cola got no chance to do any other that use only 1 billion. So somebody's making 5 billions. And to make 5 billion bottles, you have to have a lot of money. So somebody is investing money in creating plastic. And this is the people that we had to target. And this is the people that we have problem with the regulation, with the same decision maker, because we can say, we have a lot of trouble for the same thing, because we need to teach the people the truth. We need to tell them who they are. So in the UK, our family bank, the root in the British family, Barclays Bank, that's the number one investor in the world. The people don't know that. So why I think it's necessary to say it is because if you are an environmentalist, you are, you're doing your bit for the planet. You are recycling. You are teaching your kids everything. You are becoming vegan. Anything, whatever you think you are doing better for the planet. But you are banking with Barclays. You don't know that your money is being used to create plastic. That shouldn't be. The people should be, educated and informed where their money is and what their money is doing. It's their money. Barclays is not using their own money. Barclays doesn't have money. Barclays have customers with money. and they use this money to create plastic. So if we want to change things, we need to change it by the root. And we need to take responsible, may the people pay or make the changes of what they are doing. And this is what our organization is doing with several projects, changing the education. As you said before, the next generation will receive all the bad that we made, all the bad that we have done. But also we have the opportunity to teach them. So when they are the decision maker of the future, they know the problem that we have with the Earth, the planet. And I want to make clear, in our view, we don't have to we hear everywhere. We need to save the planet. We need to save this. We don't have to save the planet. The planet don't need to be saved. You know, we are trying to make it better for our survival. The Earth has been 4.5 million years in here. It happened, you know, the coldest ever on the universe, the hottest on the universe, and it still survived. So it's just we are, as human, we are nothing. We have no intelligence, and we believe that we are saving the planet. That is a concept, but I think it's just thinking too big of ourselves, thinking that we can save the planet. The planet will be here for another 10 billion. You know, it's us. We're going to disappear for what we are doing.
So it's sustaining the conditions that we need rather than protecting the planet. What came up for me then is that, you know, it's just citizen is that we often, like you said, don't have that knowledge. And I guess it's that ignorance that we aren't aware who these big giants are who are potentially doing bad things, you know, for the environment or making profit. And it's not always on our radar. And it's a bit like when you walk into the supermarket or you go and get your coffee or whatever, it's just not the first thing that we're thinking about. So I guess a lot of that is about that awareness. And even with products that we're buying, I feel also that you kind of think, oh, I'll take the environmental better choice. I'll take, you know, that plastic rather than this plastic or a different type of bag. But actually, we're not always then necessarily making the right choices either. There's marketing, there's profit being made out of environmental protection and recycling as well. So I find that's quite difficult to navigate.
We are working in two projects right now. One is transparency with the financial organization and banks, where they have, today in the UK, it's no regulation for them to say, this is where I'm putting the money. It doesn't exist because it's not good for them. So we are working on a project to make it law, the transparency of all the financial organization. And second, I don't know if in every country the same. In the UK, this is how environmental ideas become profit for big guys. In the UK, we have to pay for a bag if you go to a supermarket and you don't have a bag. So you pay for a bag. That was banned a few years back. Then no more bags, so you have to bring yours or you have to pay one. The idea, the regulation, the law that there was for any commercial institution selling product and selling bags, that the money from the bags was to be invested in environmental projects. So it was like a little punishment for the people because you didn't bring a bag, so you are damaging the planet. So you had to pay whatever, 10 pence, 20 pence. That was the idea. So the money will be to make better for the planet. 2 months after that, nobody remembered that regulation was for the planet. So now, Tesco and Asda, they are the biggest supermarket here. Last year, they made £2.5 million in profit for the bags.
That's criminal.
And I think, you know, Hugo, your perspective is so powerful because of your honesty and, you know, sharing these facts. And as Penny touched on, like, people don't have this information and this information is hidden. This information is hidden. And, you know, we can go down the route of scandal, whistleblowing, you know, but whatever, like, but this is just the reality that business is conducted in ways that is commercially, but it's for me, it's the challenge as an individual, and Penny touched on this as well, is like, yes, it's your education, but it's your intentionalism and your you know, what do you have capacity to understand and make a difference? And actually, you know, if through this conversation, someone who is, it does have meaning to them and they want to explore who they bank with and their investments, like that's, if we can enable someone to give that consideration, or it might be someone that actually, you know, yes, I am forgetful about plastic bags, but I'm going to change, you know, make a decisive change now. It's those small things, but with that we need this information, and this is a huge motivation of ours at the Informed Perspective, is you where do you go for that information? And until you listen to people's experience and people's perspectives and people's knowledge, and you might not agree with it, or it might be conflicting for you or whatever, but until we start to really listen, then we're not going to be able to make the informed choices. And when it comes to things like the environment, that's have such, okay, we might only be individuals and small contributing factors, but you know, it still does have a contribution. So it's so powerful to hear you speak, and I appreciate your honesty.
Yeah, we you know, we are changing this about the bag as well. This is another project that people need to know. But what is difficult for us, because we are a non-for-profit organization, so the big players know how to hit us. So whenever we try to do, is somehow it get delayed, or you know, the communication breakdown. So it's like it's like a chess play. Okay, we need to move this, but what will be the consequences? This guy is gonna see this, so they're gonna stop the funding from this side. It shouldn't be like that. You know, we are not the bad guys here. We are trying to do something good for everyone. But no, we have more problem than a normal company. If I become a limited company for profit, probably I will have a better life that they're having today, because it's so difficult, it's so powerful from the other side, that the little people like us have to join with other little people to try to make an impact. But even though we do that, we partner with any organization that want to work with us, or we try to work with them, still you will see that it's very, very difficult to pass certain like hurdles to move forward, and how you say, to make the people aware of all this. Because just for us, we have this program every 3 weeks in the BBC on a live show. Since we had the problem with Barclays, we've been erased from the BBC because we mentioned the big money maker for the politician and from the government. So it's difficult, but it's not impossible. So we're gonna carry on with fund, without fund, with friends, without friends. We're gonna do anything we can. People need to know. They want to know.
Yeah, my only fear though is that, like, not my fear, but I think that's also going back to the capacity that Jenny was talking about, is that also for many people, if you are struggling to put food on the table, if you have so much stress in your life, that of course it feels for some people, I guess, like an additional thing that you can't potentially fulfill, although you would like to. And I'm not saying you can't, but I think there is that certain hurdle. So I'd be curious, what kinds of projects or initiatives actually gain traction, do you find, that help, you know, get people motivated?
We are in the part of education. We needed to find ways to get to the public, and then we can pass our message directly without passing through the green, we call the red doors. There are doors that we can't pass because either they don't want us to go through. So we needed to go above the doors. So we create a project that nobody can say no. because it's the community involved. So when community is involved, it's a powerful thing. It's a powerful thing for politicians. It's a powerful thing for government. So they're very careful to not try to stop it because it's a lot of people behind it. So we are, for example, we're launching in January a project in London. We are installing 36 bronze statues in central London. All are about endangered species. For example, you like to work with polar bears. You're not going to be able to work with polar bears in the UK. We don't have that. But people are not aware that 18 organizations are working with polar bears in the UK. So when you go to this statue and the app and the technology the statue has, they tell you exactly where to go, who you need to call, who are the guys working on this, what is needed from you, how you can get involved. So it's no reason for you to say, I didn't know how to start. Everything is in there. But this is for the public. For us, is directly connection with the public in London, with the million of tourists coming around, that pass our message. Nobody can say, you can say that because it's our product, it's our app. We manage the app from here. So we are expecting to be more allowed to get to the public with our message, for example, about banks, institutions, plastic bag, everything we're trying to do with the million of people that will be in central London. And to make it more, like a bit bigger, we call environmentalists, they are very well known around the world, to work with us on this. So we have big names that will attract a lot of people. But this is what I wanted to, when answering your question, how we can do this, is not listen to the people who will say no and do your own project. Try to do somehow, wave the red doors, try to put it aside and just carry on with your project and then reach the people that you want to reach. Because if you are an environmentalist, if you, in here in the UK and many countries, you are being seen as a nuisance. You know, you are coming to make problems. You are coming to protest. You're coming. It's never like the good side of what you are trying to say. It's always like, oh, come on, these guys again. So, but we having a good message to give. So, because the people don't want us to give the message, you need to find ways to do it. So it is possible. It's more difficult than a normal thing, but it's necessary. So we have to carry on. And that's why we partner and we work with many people around and organizations around the world.
I love that. And I love the boldness of the project, Hugo, as well, because, and I think what that, I want that to inspire others and those listening, is that actually it shows that if you've got an interest in one element of your impact on the environment, let's say that. So personally, when I lived in the UK, I invested a lot in effort, time and money to try and be as plastic free as possible. And that was my interest. And then once you have that interest and you're using it with the animals, for example, and the endangered species, then that's the first layer. And what can you do? How can you get involved? And then you've got access to the people that are doing the work, the research they're doing, the information they can share. And I just think that's actually quite empowering to say to people that it's okay to start small, and have that one interest and what's feasible and meaningful to you. And then if you really do maintain that interest, you can find out more. And I think your project is an amazing example of that. I can't wait to see it when I return to the UK next summer.
Yeah, because we was losing a lot of people that say, look, I would love to do that, but I'm in the UK, so they will go to work in something they don't like, and we are missing this energy and all this idea that can come from that person because they didn't know how to start. So this is how we thought, and we managed to create a project that the people will have direct access to the information they need. So it's no excuse to say, I didn't know how to start. Well, there it was.
Yeah, it's like out of sight, out of mind as well, I think. Like so much goes on in the world and you hear so much and you can kind of drown it out, right? But if we're talking about how it, whether it's coming to your community or it's about your own community, I think that is where the power is to make people then really notice it. Linus, I'd love to turn to you now. You lead programs like the Youth Innovation under Mariners for Action. And I wanted to ask you, why is education, especially environmental education, so critical for the next generation if we're going to do better than we have?
Thank you, Penny, for that question. Now, the environmental education program for the students is a very special program that we've been running for about 1 year. And before we started working with students, we were focusing on the adults, those are the fishermen. And then we later realized that there's a lot of information gap about what happens at sea or the environment, the marine environment in general. Most of these students are coming from fishing families in Kenya, coastal part. So fishing is the main source of livelihood for the coastal population. And most of the kids that we interacted before we began this project only knew that what you can get from the ocean is fish. And the opportunity that lies within the blue economy is just fishing, and it ends there. So later on, when engaging their parents that were part of the adult program, we also realized that the students were more curious than the parents to learn more about the ocean and how to conserve it. Because some of the practices that we saw as destructive or as unsustainable, for the adult population, it's something that is deeply embedded into their culture. For instance, when you talk about use of certain methods for fishing, like the spear guns or monofilament nets, and then as an environmental educator, you are addressing people who are 80 years and above, and you are telling them that this is wrong, this is not how it's supposed to be done. Then they will pose some questions. We've been doing this for 80 years or 70 years plus, and they still fish in the sea. And then another thing, when you're talking about the issue of microplastics, so the fact that they cannot see it, they cannot believe it. And as an educator, you find a very hard time trying to explain that to the adults. So we said, how about complementing this adult program with a student program where now we try to nurture these students at a very younger age, because they've not been conditioned yet to believe that the sea has unlimited supply of fish. No matter what you do, you still be getting fish. And so we sat down with my team and some of the representatives from the community. We said, okay, so let's draft a very simple program that only focuses on children and aims to empower them with the knowledge of their surrounding first. They understand where they live and the environment they live in and the challenges that are there. And then now we come up with ideas of empowering them with skills to be actively involved in the conservation programs that we are doing. So then it became a project that was inspiring to us, because after every session, you'll get more questions from students. They want to learn more about the ocean. They want to take part in the cleanup exercises. And then after some time, about 2 months, we realized that there was more to do with the students and the adults. Of course, the adult program is progressive. It takes a lot of time to shift perspectives and giving them case studies from different places, which in many cases they refute. They say, no, that is, for example, when you talk about stock depletion, regional stock depletion in fish, they will tell you that it's affected by seasonality than the abundance of fish at sea. If, for example, we give data that from last year, December, to this year, December, we've recorded from the scientific insights, we've recorded 20% decline in maybe rabbit fish populations. Now, the veteran fishers would say, that one is dependent on the ocean current. So, they come up with an idea to disregard what you're saying. But for children, for instance, if you tell them that we are having, we have a problem of sea turtles stranding a lot in our geography, especially the green turtles, where they ingest straws and they die. So when you give them examples and pictures and videos of this happening, you see they start getting concerned. They actually feel sad for what is happening, and they want to get more involved. So we curated this project into different themes that relate with what students know or what they interact with on their daily basis. And I think up to this extent, it is a project that we see as one of the most important ways of ensuring that these children have the right values at a very younger age, so that before they reach adolescent or an age where they start having or being influenced by this community and the society that is the fishing community, they already have an idea of what threats we are facing and how we can mitigate them.
What about the Kenyan curriculum? Is it environment protection something that is part of what the kids are learning in schools? Is there something that should be changed? What are your thoughts on that?
Now, for a long time, it's not something that was very popular in schools. For instance, when I was in the university year one, that's when I started learning about things to do with marine conservation, sea turtles, sharks, and everything. So it has not been fully integrated into the school curriculum, but there have been calls from the civil society, environmental activists to have these things embedded into that curriculum so that children can know from a very early age. It becomes part of what they learn in school every day. But to this extent, those fruits have not, the efforts have not borne fruits, but it's a continuous process. The more we talk about it, the more there are recommendations from the private sector, the NGOs, and the international players. We are hoping that at some point it's going to be where we want it to be.
Amazing. I think that awareness is so important, but how do you then get the kids to take the awareness that you're giving them and actually translate that into something in the community, I suppose? What sort of suggestions are you making?
So I think it's you, Penny, that mentioned something about the community having some urgent needs, and you're talking about climate change, and it's like you're not addressing what they want, or you're not saying what they really want to hear. So we started having some simple projects of plastic waste management where we set up aggregation hubs in different beach management units. Those are the associations of the fishers. So it was aimed at doing plastic collection from the homestays and also from the beaches, the cleanup drives that we facilitate, and then we outsource experts from recycling firms to train them on sorting. After the plastic is sorted, it adds some value to it, and then they sell, and it gives them some money. It's through the linkages. So with the schools, when we began the student awareness program, we separated into two. There was one that was focused on the species, the sea turtles, the sharks and rays, the dolphins, and then there was one that was general, but we linked it to the plastic waste management project that we were doing. So we would, because these schools are situated in very remote areas, they have access to the beach, but they are very remote. So we'd say, give them targets. Per school, we say we need maybe 5 tons of plastic within 2 weeks or within 3 weeks. So when they come to school in the morning, they pick plastic from their homes, then they bring. And then after that duration, we now involve the recyclers who come and buy, and they get some money, and also they get some present in terms of books and other equipment that they use in school. So to some extent, that gave them the motivation to keep being part of that project. Being part of that awareness program, and also the field visits, getting them involved in the activities that we do in the beach cleanups, the mangrove planting exercises, and some boat rides to see for instance, when you talk about dolphins, they haven't seen dolphins before, and then now we organize these trips, we take them there, they interact with these species, and then they get motivated to learn more about that.
Do you think it's important that the adults, the parents, are also getting involved? Because I think that's something that Jenny and I see. We're all about trying to reignite local community and what it means. But it's all very well to sort of say to the kids, come along, get involved. But if the parents aren't walking the talk, I think that's the right one, does that actually, how is that? Are you finding that it's more difficult to reach the parents, the grown-ups?
Parents or the adults normally weigh between coming to the sessions or the community forums or going to get fish. see. And in most cases, they'll settle for doing something that gives them money. So I think it's very important, because if you look at the environmental damage for children, they only access what their parents give them, especially, you know, if it has to do with plastics, or if it's about eating turtle meat, or the mangrove, the illegal, it's banned, the illegal mangrove logging that is going on, they'll only be involved in the sale by their parents, but it's not something that they do themselves. So I think it's very important, and we've been trying to access these parents through community forums that we organize on a monthly basis, bringing on board the government agencies of the Kenya Wildlife Service, we have the Kenya Fisheries Service, and also the leadership of these beach management units, the fishing communities. So be able to have conversations about environmental protection first, because what we realized is that we had laws, very good laws for environmental protection, but then now it was becoming difficult for enforcement when people do not necessarily really understand the essence of conserving the environment. So you'll be arresting people, and then they say, okay, like what I said about the belief that the sea provides unlimited supply of fish. You know, they're arrested for using maybe the illegal gears, the monofilament nets or mosquito nets to fish. But then when you engage this fisherman that has been arrested, he says, I've been doing this ever since, and when it comes to April or May, I'll still be getting fish. So we realize that there is a problem. And then also when you talk about the main problem that we are having is that of targeting of sea turtle meat. There are some myths amongst the coastal communities that it has some health benefits. Of course, it has not been scientifically proven, so it becomes so difficult to address that. But now when you start telling them, or rather informing them, that the turtle meat is toxic because it's an animal that moves, you know, within the oceans, where it was, for instance, if it was hatched in Kenya, it will move to Australia, but when it comes to, when it becomes sexually mature, and it wants to lay eggs, it comes back to the same spot, meaning it moves around the oceans, consumes a lot of toxic chemicals. So the conversation of the impact of consuming that meat helps us shape the perceptions of these fishes. So it's not more of if you do this, you'll be arrested, but if you do this, it affects your health. So it's a process that is still ongoing, but the adult population, of course, it's challenging, as I said, because of shifting the mindsets that, you know, some of those beliefs are within their culture. It's difficult, but I would say we've not lost hope. It's a process that is still ongoing.
And it's that personal impact that, you know, Lennis, that you say is so important, because it's actually, where does the contribution to the process, where does it have a personal impact? And with young people, and even with adults, you can share an experience and make that association, but it always goes back to, as well, storytelling. So what does happen when you drop a bit of plastic, or you're not careful not to drop a bit of plastic? Just, you know, understanding that cadence, and it's then those ideas that then can help spread the message. You know, I have this, you know, wonderful vision of the children that you're educating, you know, eventually having those conversations with their parents as well. This is what I'm learning, and challenging them and being able to have the conversation, and you know, they've been informed, and we can all continue to do that. But I think where the impact is when you can connect with someone to where it matters to them or their experience. And it sounds like you're doing some amazing examples with that.
I'm thinking back to my childhood many, many years ago, and thinking back to, like, do you remember on Blue Peter, they used to do sort of campaigns, and it would be like so many things, but it would be bring and buy sales or collect bottle tops and all these things. I remember there was a real energy behind conservation. At least that's my memories as a child, that we really did a lot. We did sponsored things, sponsored silences, whatever. And I do wonder whether that has petered out a bit, or at least more saturated, because of the social media and everything, this information that we've got around us, that it's not so novel and so exciting anymore, whether that has a part to play. I don't know whether, Hugo, if you have anything to sort of say about that, or anyone else.
You're on mute. Hugo.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Yeah, I would say the Blue Peter was, yeah, it was a flagship for environment. You know, everybody wanted to get that the badge they give you. You know, it was like a silly thing, but it meant a lot for people when you get one. You know, because that was like you doing something really good for the planet. I think you are right with the social media today. It's just too much. It's everywhere, and it's probably 90% they're not well structured, or it's not meaningful, don't get you involved in anything. I don't think the people, or the young generation, the kid, they have probably 30-second attention span. You know, you can't explain something for like 25, half an hour, because it's not interested for them. The subject is interested, but you need to find a way how to make it in a short period of time very exciting, and for them to wanted to follow.
Because I'm remembering those conservation. Do you remember you used to adopt an animal? So you'd adopt like a snow leopard or something, and then you'd get the pack through the post, and it would have like everything about the pictures and the animal and all the facts. And of course, now you don't need to wait for that. All I have to do is go online. I've got that information if I want it.
Yeah. It's not exciting anymore. It's you know, we think we're not expert in anything. We think that people want to get involved. They don't want to hear that, you know, give you some money because we are doing something amazing. They want to be part of it. You know, that's how it should be. You know, but many organizations are like, oh, you know, do this for all, donate here, do this one, bring this one, buy this pack. But for you, it's nothing in return. You know, you're not getting involved. Oh, yeah, you feel good because I'm giving money to save a leopard. But actually, when you get these people involved, we do that with schools and universities. Honestly, I don't do much. They do everything. But we get more in return because they wanted to do it. So,
but I challenge just a little part of that, Hugo, is that people do want to get involved, but they have to be enabled to do it. And you are enabling that. You know, people, you touched about the limited time that people have in terms of attention. You know, my little triangle of this theory is the investment, there's the time, the financial. So sometimes you're like, yeah, I'll donate this, but will I spend the time to go and learn more about that cause? And then the effort, that effort investment, like will I actually do something? And I think if great organizations like one of you actually are enabling people by creating programs and opportunities, then that's there. But I still think that needs to be served to people these days, because there's a whole world out there, so excuse but there's so much out there that they're like, oh, tick that box, give that money, you know,
or it's too much and you don't do anything at all.
Well, so
it is. This is the problem, because you know, social media, TV, radio, internet, everything is in 2 seconds. The information is there in front of you. So sometimes it's overwhelming. It's like you feel that it's so much to do. I can't do any of this because it's just too big. The problem is too big. My effort probably not going to affect anything.
Yeah.
But you're all being passionate about what you're doing, and that's why I want to go to Mlibo next and hear a little bit about how your passion for conservation and environmental education began.
So it began, obviously, I think just to like give you a bit of background, I am Xhosa. I'm like sort of basically one of the 11 sort of official languages of South Africa. And I basically grew up in a rural sort of village in the Eastern Cape where, again, you know, there's not a lot happening, as you say, and it takes a lot out of you in terms of like as a community member to just see nothing being done, but rather like your community almost like crumble to just like sort of dust particles. So for me, it was always like an urge to actually sort of like really get grounded. I felt almost always like sort of out of place, sort of growing up in the villages and not really seeing a lot of grass or a lot of trees, for instance. And I found that like, with all the sort of like, let's say families and everyone within the homesteads there, they didn't really quite understand the importance of actually really having a lot more sort of like greenery or trees. I think for them, the currency of a tree was just valuable in terms of providing shade or whatever that maybe, let's say, you could pick out of it and actually sort of have it as a feast. But for me, it was more about I really enjoyed staying outside. I really enjoyed sort of like really going outside, getting myself dirty. And I remember at school, it was an offering, but not necessarily sort of wide of an offering. It was just like a small club. And I remember asking the one teacher, and he was very passionate in terms of like just teaching us about, sort of wild animals. And at that time, I didn't even have a, clue what is the difference between, a leopard or sort of a cheetah. And I think when you start really like then gauging yourself into understanding the differences between something that is so similar, especially from someone who knows nothing, you start to really dig deeper into it. So I started like actually really going to this club every Friday. But apart from that, on my weekends, I'd be at home, I'd be sharing that with my friends and the people that I grew up with. So they then started to almost like kind of be fascinated to know what is next. And then I remember thinking to myself, it's not enough to just go to a club. It's not enough to just like, get handed out that information. I then started to actually sort of watch Nat Geo Wild a lot more. And that became then again a school of knowledge, a school of, really just information that was really, I think, ease of access, but necessarily, I think, in terms of like the privilege of not everyone having a television in the rural villages, it's not really easily accessible for them. And so I was then privileged enough to actually have that access to like really just like then watch and actually learn to a degree that when I went into school, when everyone was being asked, what do you want to do? My sort of answers always led towards marine biology, conservation, nature conservation, or anything that had to do with some sort of an environmental involvement. And to a point where when I went to university, I actually decided between game ranch management and nature conservation, but I ended up choosing nature conservation because it was a lot more broader in terms of like what it covered, because game ranch management was like slightly more sort of confined to game reserves. And from there on, again, you get to then now meet a whole sort of world of actual sort of, environmentalists. Now you're in the heart of things where people are actually sort of engaging and really doing the work that, we sort of want everyone else to almost like sort of understand or maybe shift their approach and perspective. So it then sort of dawned onto me that actually it really brings me so much peace and joy, knowing that I contribute to society in a positive way. And it then started off as like, my weekly engagements. Every week on a Wednesday or a Saturday, there is somewhat of an organization doing a beach cleanup or a sort of litter sort of pickup on the campus. And then in that way, you sort of start to build and understand what it is that you're doing it for, because obviously you're not really getting paid to do it. And I think at that time for me, because I was a student, it gave me so much value for what I was trying to actually also achieve in terms of my studies. Because certain modules obviously will want to ask you in terms of how do you sort of articulate a certain sort of concept and how would you contribute back into society within the environmental space as to how can we change certain approaches to how do we get people more involved in the conservation world. I mean, you don't have to have a degree, you don't have to have a diploma, you don't even have to have a qualification. All you need to do is to have the will and also just the time and just like the passion to really see something actually develop into something more. And you've got to have a selfless sort of, demeanor about it as well, because not entirely will it be very much instant in terms of the gratification, but rather down the line, you will actually sort of see the changes. And so I think, just to like sort of really narrow it down in terms of passions, that was how I actually sort of draw my passions in terms of conservation. But then it morphed into something more and more, because as I actually sort of grew into my roles and actually my jobs, I basically got to sort of understand that there's a gap here. There's really like a lot of sort of missed links which we aren't really addressing. And I think myself now, having gone through university, I think I've always had the notion that I would never want to almost just like study and study and then just eventually just only get a job and then stay there. I actually always wanted to do more than that. I actually really wanted to create more opportunities because I saw just how hard it was for me to almost like fast track myself to get where I was when I needed to in terms of like getting that knowledge. So in order for someone else now who knows nothing, no clue, no clubs, no access in terms of information, how do they go about, having to learn? How do they get into the profession, number one? Number two, also, how can they contribute selflessly in whatever that they have? And so then the projects that I then started to like sort of come about, that's the reason why then I started to actually sort of pour more into that. And that's why when I was in the Midlands with my first official job, I then started the project, which was for the disadvantaged communities to actually sort of invite all of their like sort of students from the sort of village schools to actually have a nature reserve sort of walk. And I guided it myself. But within that notion, it was never really about just myself fulfilling that for them, but it was more about I'm battling with poaching issues on the reserve that I was managing at the time. And I realized that it's neither them being ignorant initially, but it's rather they don't know. And I think you can't really fault someone where they don't know something. You can really try and battle it as much as you can, but it's tough to fault someone when they know not they don't know better. So I then decided to change the approach in which I invite them to have an accessible walk. I gave them like, a nice talk and also have like some engagement fun times and just like to get them to, you also get to learn from them what it is that they basically actually understand and know at that time. And so it was quite interesting because as I said, my Zulu language vocabulary at the time was so poor, and Xhosa and Zulu are not so like, exact, but they're quite similar. And so I had to almost ask them to teach me what it is that I'm like sort of looking at in their language. What do they know it as? And then in my way of trying to give them more information, I'll then elaborate in terms of what it is scientifically that it is known as, and also what's the purpose for it. So in that way, we were able to meet each other in the middle. And by the end of it, the kids actually loved it. And instead, we got like all 17 schools to actually really bring a grade or a group of students. But for me and for the nature reserve, we were able to tackle a bigger issue, which was poaching. So we actually get to really solve a lot of issues when we really start to actually maybe just look at the simple things that we can actually sort of give for each other. And then in that way, it actually collectively draws back into this one common cause, which is to conserve nature. So it was quite sort of a tricky start, but it eventually got some traction because everyone at first didn't quite understand. But I think with the sort of output and feedback, they actually really wanted to actually warm up to more and more of that. And then since I've moved obviously from the rural sectors now to be more in the city base, I've actually also like sort of partnered now with bigger NGOs which happen to look at, let's say, fixing infrastructure within South Africa, especially in Johannesburg, because our government is struggling. With a whole lot of corruption really just like kind of rooting out into the country. We are struggling to just like get the bare necessities actually really done by the municipalities. So a lot of like community-based organizations have now started to take matters into their own hands. So I've reached out to a lot of them, and they're quite willingly sort of like just accepting of the offer that because I'm already driving projects within the conservation and environmental space, they would love someone to also like sort of bring that within the city, because I think there's this misconception that within the city it can only have so much of environmental or any nature reserve space, whereas you can actually sort of integrate small parts and actually sort of intertwine both of them, because at the end of the day, we need it. We need the environment. We need it as an ecosystem to survive. And it really like sort of grew the attention of much of the sort of stakeholders within the precincts that I'm working within, because they struggle a lot with like recycling, and as a result of poor recycling, we get a lot of stormwater drainage systems clogged with like all the rubbish and everything. And that in turn becomes a road problem, because then now there's no stormwater drainage systems operating. The water then floods on the roads, and then now we start having having issues of potholes. So now it's actually sort of like crumbling the city from just one major problem of not recycling or actually collecting dustbins. And it now trickles into infrastructure damage to a degree where now productivity within the city or within the country, and that affects the economy. So we've got to look at, I think, the fundamentals in terms of how do we really sort of, actually sort of spread this information so that people readily can use it, but in a not so like overwhelming way as we've been discussing, because it is apparent that there's a lot happening. But I think it needs us as custodians and stewards that already understand what is going on, what is already set up, and how can we make it easier for everyone who neither knows what's going on but will really like to get involved in terms of how to get involved, and also that even the littlest of something that they plan to do actually has such a significant outcome. And yeah.
That's amazing. I'm kind of thinking as well in urban centers that it's also a bit of an antidote, isn't it? To sort of help children to sort of say, in comparison to the stuff you're doing, you're inside, you're online, because that is a thing. I mean, obviously, maybe not in more remote areas, but it's something, the environment, the conservation is something for your mental health as well. You're getting outside, you're meeting people, you're volunteering, you're making a difference to your community. So that is actually, and going back to the Blue Peter badge again, it's that sense of pride and making your own little mark on it that might then influence your life, is huge. And I think that is what we've probably forgotten, right?
Yeah. And to get back to your Blue Peter sort of topic, I know it's probably way before my time, but in South Africa we've got similar sort of programs as well, where like we actually run initiatives like collecting bottle tops and also bread tags in order to like sort of, if you fill up that sort of water dispenser container with bottle tops or bread tags, they can actually sort of like be handed over into like a charity, which then sort of converts that into a wheelchair, which can be given to someone who cannot afford one. So there are drives like that are still happening, but that I think again it goes to the question of what is it that the person is getting out of it themselves. And I think that's where we've had to become creative in South Africa, especially within the private school sector. So we've actually sort of adopted the more service hourly sort of incentives. So we give out hours as a form of, incentivizing anyone really pouring into sort of collecting bread tags or bottle tops as a form of passive hours, because then they're not really actively, serving the community. And it works so well to a degree. But then at the same time, I think it also lies within the side of increasing the consumerism in us, because then in order for them to fill up that tub, now they need to almost encourage people to buy products that will give you those bottle tops. So we have to sort of manage it in a way. That's the sort of dangers I find, because it's quite really, it's imbalance at this point. But it's going pretty well for us at St. John's, but other schools are also like sort of getting onto the drive. And quite recently, I had attended a conference with some of the private schools within the precinct, and we've adopted a new sort of approach as to how can we collaborate as schools, because I think so many times organizations probably do this quite a lot as well. They want to run their own projects when we could all collaborate. Collaboration is probably the biggest impact you can actually sort of, really significantly get an outcome from, because it's already there. You just now pulling in your resources. Everyone else is pulling in their resources, but the biggest reward is that the outreach is actually so much more, because then now we've got a lot more networks to reach more people and actually sort of educate more and aware more. But we've got to get away from doing things as individuals. We've got to collaborate. We've got to collaborate, and it's for the greater cause, because again, you can even see it in the way that nature or the environment actually sort of survives. It survives as an ecosystem. It could never survive with just one part or one species, because we need each other. And I think it speaks symbolically to why we need to really collaborate in order to like sort of try and tackle some of these issues.
I think that's such an important conclusion, but linking back to how we started, and it's these corporations, financing, investments and budgets that are all done not in silo, but for own purposes, and there's not that collaboration for, excuse the cringy word, but like the greater good. Essentially, it's all, people have got too much a selfish gain there as well. And I think, but the other thing that I really love is it's in hearing your story, and also, you know, all of your sort of origins and why you started and your motivations. But for the next generations, it's about instilling passion and that purpose. And if you can do that, if you can make it have meaning, which I touched on before, is make it have meaning to an individual, then that goes so far, because it won't just be about collecting bottle tops. It would be like, why am I doing it? What's the value of it? Yes, maybe to my own personal gain, which goes back to, you know, individualism, but actually, like, I don't want people to buy the bottles. I actually only want the ones that have been purchased, and that's the true value. And because you can learn more and have that invested interest and passion.
I'd like to put a question out to all of you, or whoever would like to answer it. And I thought it'd be nice to have something a bit more potentially positive. If we do succeed in instilling care for our planet in the next generation, what changes do you hope to see in society in the next 10 to 20 years? Or even one? Yeah, go ahead.
I'll answer that. Okay, so I think for me, I definitely do have high hopes that, you know, we are moving in the right direction. I think sustainability already within corporates and the corporate sort of side of things is slowly getting traction. It might not necessarily, maybe let's say, equate to the practical side of things, but I think policy-wise, it is getting there. But I think when it comes to sort of like, you know, what we could possibly change, I think within the syllabus of the curriculum, in terms of the academic sort of just base, I think foundationally it needs to be included as much as personal hygiene, as much as foundational sort of growth, because it's part of who we are as humans. We cannot survive without it, and neither can, you know, generations to come actually sort of like, you know, be disadvantaged by not being prepared enough. And I think it starts with just like the visions of like the new governments that are coming into place. We need to be a bit more proactive in terms of what we want in terms of the outcome of the academic sort of syllabus, because it needs to change. I mean, it is a bit outdated, especially in South Africa. We are still really using an old system, which doesn't necessarily prepare a teenager for life, and also like sort of any sort of adolescents for any form of foundational sort of, I think, growth as well. And we are really in talks, to be honest, with some of the big stakeholders who actually have an influence in terms of how the syllabus is actually sort of set up, which is something in South Africa we at least are really trying to push. But I think as far as globally, it would be really, I think, a dream to really have conservation, environmentalism, as well as just like the sharing of all the needed. I think when I say the needed, in terms of like new career choices that need to be actually sort of outlined, because I think there's a saturation in terms of what is already here and what is working, but it's not enough to sustain what is actually coming in terms of the populations. And we need to be creative and innovative in terms of we need to adapt. We need to adapt. The world is changing and we need to change with it as well.
Great. Linus?
Yeah, I would start by saying that I think history has taught us well that nature takes care of us more than we take care of it. And we've seen that the challenges of floods, you know, the impacts of climate change that we are seeing now, these are things that are affecting lives. And at this moment, like when we talk about the curriculum integrating environmental education, it is a high priority, because we cannot wait any longer for that. The more we keep talking about these things in confined spaces and not allowing the larger community. For example, when we were talking about social media, the communities that we work with mostly, they have little access to digital platforms. And in most cases, you realize that even if scientists conduct research, they do not have access to the findings. And when that happens, our own politicians, we understand, they want to be popular. And in most cases, you realize the scientific output does not necessarily inform policy formulation. And that is influenced by who has the money, who has the influence. So my colleague was talking about collaboration. I think when we collaborate, we get more impact, and it will be easier now to have influence on matters such as policy. So I think in the next 10 years, as you asked, I believe one of the things that made me start doing conservation and mobilizing people to this cause is that I really feel sad when you see people cannot be able to afford a meal or 2 meals in a day, and then the resources are vast, So I feel like in the next couple of years, if we can be able to harness the power of, like where we work, blue economy, there's a lot of opportunities that are there, but there is an imminent threat, like plastic pollution, And as a society or activists, it will be difficult for us if it will be difficult for us to influence change if we are not backed by proper policies, So I really feel like at this point, it has been a conversation that people talk about. We don't give it the attention that it really deserves, but the issue of climate change, it's there. And if we can be able to try, please, to mitigate it, the other compounding problems that we're having, like, the floods, the poverty and all that, I think at some point we'll be able to have a better shot at addressing them.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think when it comes to voting as well for what leaders you want, that's also crucial. Like, what do they believe in? What are they going to follow? And Hugo, for you?
I think I agree with everybody here. For the future, we can get better. But we need today to give the basic tools for the next generations. Education, I think, what we are working as well, but it shouldn't happen only in the UK. It should be around the world. Education should have compulsory, sustainable and environmental subjects. As important as math, history, English, environment, anything like that, because what we can base what happened here. Today in the UK, the teacher can go to school and speak about whales if he wants. But at the same time, if he don't want to speak about anything, it's not compulsory. He don't need to. But we are saying that the next generation are doing better. We hear everywhere, next generation will do better. Next generation this, next generation. How we are expecting them to do better? We are not doing anything different of what we did when we was at school. So why? They're gonna, I don't know, wake up in 20 years and say, you know what? Yeah, I'm gonna save the planet today. That had to be from little. If you look at for example, and it's something that we base some of our project, in the Japanese culture, they really respect the planet and everything that is around them. That was a shock for me. I didn't know. Japanese in schools, they don't have cleaners. The cleaner doesn't exist really in Japan because the culture is to look after whatever you have in front of you. So if you have to go to the toilet, you will leave it better than how you found it. And this had to be not only in Japan. This should be around the world. We should respect. Learning to respect, we will be able to respect everything.
Yeah. It's not rocket science either. If you think about a curriculum, why isn't environment like one of the top things? We live here. It's like our place. And if we're not talking about it, what's the rest going to serve you?
We are working on change of curriculum. Actually, at this time, we are testing the new curriculum in 38 schools with environmental subject included in the new curriculum. But the government is very reluctant to change. And the answer was, it's always working. Why you want to change it? But at the same time, the last time the education curriculum was changed in the UK, was modified, was in 1974 for the problem that we have in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
Today, we have totally different problems. So why not modify? The reasons are from them, it's too expensive, it's too much work for the teachers, And if it had been working for 100 years, why we want to change it now?
But that's the same as... Yeah.
The problem is, again, is the decision makers. Because the decision maker of today, they didn't live the problem that, for example, the decision maker we have with this project with the education, they are in the 70s and the 80s. For them, plastic never was a problem when they was little. And of course it wasn't a problem, it was not even invented. So they don't see, because they didn't live and they wasn't taught about plastic pollution. We didn't have that problem. So I understand that they don't see as a big threat. So it's not a big threat, it's not a big thing, just a bunch of environmentalists trying to change things. But the next generation will see it. They are living it. So we have the opportunity to get more information to them. So when they are in position to make the decision to change the education curriculum, for example, they will be based in their own life and their own education.
I think we've had a lot of conversations as well on other podcasts that we've had and talking with other people, and also the other things for the curriculum that actually are essential for me for the environment, empathy, and you've mentioned it, respect. These are the other things that we need to be learning about, these social skills, other things like life skills that we need within that curriculum, and that sort of lends itself to supporting that, right? If I'm empathetic, I have a feeling for my surroundings, for the people around me, the animals that are here. Yeah,
we can do a lot, and the new generation are open to learn and follow what is correct. But we have to give the tools, and that's where we are failing or not being good enough.
Yeah. I'd like to turn to our Tween Talk question now, and that is, does recycling even matter if big companies keep making trash? How do we get people to step up and do something? Hugo?
The big companies, again, we go, it's because, not because I want to repeat everything, it's just because it's ending the same thing. It's profit. You know, they are making a lot of money selling product in plastic bottles. If we ask them to change to metal containers, for example, will be more expensive. Less profit, less sales, because the increase of the price go to the public. So how the big companies are doing this one is not all of them, but it's I'm sure you heard the greenwashing. So the big companies are selling anywhere, but with under the label of recyclable. Or if you see container of anything, 100% recyclable. I totally agree. Everything is recyclable. The problem is that we're not doing it. Mm-hmm. And there's not enough money to recycle everything that we have. Yeah. We are recycling about 3 to 7% of all the rubbish in the world.
And it's the process of the recycling as well when it comes to plastic. So this is where
it's too much. Nobody's taking responsibility for it. You sell 1 million bottles of perfume. As a company, you don't care what happened with the bottle after, because it's not your responsibility.
And I think, Hugo, obviously, this isn't my question to answer, but, you've spoken a lot about consumer goods, say drinks in plastic bottles. And, I do find there's, choices you can make, maybe get a can. I don't know if that's more, you're saying that things aren't being recycled, but I think particularly for this age group as well, where this motivation for this question comes from is this, mass-produced fast fashion, not even fast fashion anymore. It's more than clothes. It's fast tat. It's just toys. With young children, and you can try and do certain things, but they want it. They see it because there's the influence, there's the marketing behind it, there's the social pressure, there's the, inclusion, and these companies are buying it. And what do we do?
And you feel even bad as a parent if you don't buy what the children want. You know, it's, I don't know, we can do more, but in that aspect, as a society, as a community, it's not much we can do directly because the investment had to come from big companies. First, changing the container or things like that, or investing in more recycling plants, or new technology. Because now, for example, if you have a pizza last night and you recycle your box, it's not going to go to recycle because it's contaminated with oil.
Yeah.
So all these kind of things had to be more investment in technology to be able to recycle these kind of things. But now it's just like a basic recycling, when it's like the plastic from one side, paper on side, cardboard. So it's not much investment for the amount of rubbish and trash that we are creating every day.
I'm just thinking of those gadget shops as well. They are sort of toy shops. There's a lot of pop-up stores now, and you go in and there are thousands of like plastic key rings, plastic dolls, then there's slime, isn't there, fidget toys,
Everything.
all this stuff. And that is the rage. They all want it. And they also break. They pop so easily, all these things. So they're continually just chucking them out, getting the next one. I mean, that's just...
Disposable. Yeah, it's so disposable. And actually, my initial reaction, once again, I know it's not my question to answer, I'm sorry to keep butting in, but it's don't buy it. But it's being produced. It exists in this world. So, it's going to be wasted anyway if it's not bought, or, okay, you're putting money in the pockets in this financial gain.
And if you keep doing it, it's also not healthy.
Yeah, we have to change as a society. We have to teach the kid, because whatever up to 80%, I would say, whatever the teacher say, the kids say, or they want, the parent will kind of follow, or will listen to the kid. The same way that they want a toy, if they say no, that this toy is made with animal parts or anything, I don't want this. So if we teach the young generation, the little ones, they can pass the message and make the old one to change the behavior in a way. But if we try to change the behavior of the adult directly, I don't think it's gonna happen, or we're not gonna have big impact. Our brain is already this way. It's very difficult to really, really change from the heart when all our life has been the same.
Yeah.
Libo, what about you?
I think it's possible to make somewhat of an impact, but I think it's not entirely going to sort of, really solve the huge issue of, major companies like sort of producing and producing and producing. I mean, I look at it in the sense of where we are in terms of the school. I mean, we struggle with recycling as a concept, and it's not even the fact that they don't understand. They just don't have the conscious of just putting the right stuff into the right bin. So it starts off there, and we put up a lot of posters. We send out a lot of information to both the parents and the scholars, but also the teachers, and so it is quite a hard thing to sort of try and get people to get into at the beginning. But I think once again, when we start to really look at how do we attract the human brain to really try and actually sort of like be engaged within that moment. So we are trying to look for incentives again. I think it's always going to get to a point where we need to have some form of incentives to actually sort of buy back that form of actual consciousness, because then we can be able to at least get to somewhat form of someone really thinking about, I've got a glass bottle, what color is the bin? Okay, then I can go. And then from there on, I think it becomes quite seamless in terms of like the actual sort of removal. Although as Hugo has mentioned, it's quite impossible to recycle everything, because everyone will dump whatever that it is that they had. It's probably stained with whatever chemical or oil or substance that won't really do well with the recycling sort of machinery. And therefore, it gets rejected before even getting sorted, because it just will take a lot of time. But some people are very proactive in their recycling, as we've seen. They try and really wash out their styrofoam cups, their styrofoam sort of foldable sort of containers. They actually separate their lining, like the metallic lining, from the milk bottles. They take their sort of, eggshells and everything, and they would use it as form of their compost. So I think it works well, but we still need to, I think, maybe design a proper sort of a package where we actually show you how well it will sort of contribute to your household. And I think when we start looking at the financials in terms of how that it like decreases for you, it starts to also, I think, shape up for some families that are actually sort of counting every penny. So it becomes very much like a very big social, I think, norm that needs to really be changed. And I think when it comes to toys, when you look at it in the sense of like, buying a lot of toys, I think again, it speaks to collaboration. Maybe we should go back to the community sense, because then kids can play with the other kids. The parents can also sort of team up. You've got one soccer ball instead of having one ball each student. So, I think it starts to those habits again. Let's have a lot more nature spaces for students to actually go and run around wild. Let's have we need to, I think, really sort of like start actually sort of adopting some of the older ways which we grew up in, because I think they start to really reshape the whole decision making within a store, in front of a toy or in front of any consumable that we can actually sort of look at, because it speaks to, do I really need it, or is it a matter of I'm buying it because I can't have one because someone else won't want to play or share it with me. So I think it's again in the nature of sort of collaborations. I'm quite big on that, and I'm quite big on the community sense as well, because I've seen some very interesting sort of outcomes and results in terms of the psychology behind actually being part of a community shapes your whole sort of like decision making. And you start to really adopt a different habit in terms of what you buy, how much of it you buy, and also just like what you do with it after. So I do believe that recycling does really reduce somewhat of, the trash that goes to landfill, but it also doesn't sort of completely, I think, solves the major production that these major corporations are actually sort of producing without any knowledge where it will actually sort of go, or what do we do with it afterwards. But I do think we've got to be a bit more innovative again, because the landfill sites are filling up pretty quickly, and it's not really sustainable in the way that we have to sort of look at in long run. I mean, already our Johannesburg, sort of city, has no actual empty landfill sites where they can actually sort of dump trash. So we are slowly now looking at sort of, just telling people you've got to have to actually sort of look after your own rubbish and waste. And if you don't sort it out, then the municipality doesn't collect it. And yeah, it's just such it's a disaster waiting to happen. But we are really looking at ways in which we can reduce it. And I think recycling does become a form of, sort of a way to improve that habit of actually sorting out your rubbish, and actually really, I think, trying to allocate rubbish into the right bins. And in a way, we can actually really try and sort of change some of actual outcomes in terms of where our rubbish goes. Because it is quite sad that not only are we losing biodiversity, but we are also sort of losing a lot of horizontal land in terms of our landfill sites. And because it doesn't really get changed into some form of energy yet, in South Africa, we are struggling to basically get rid of it. It's just piling up, and it's becoming a hazard for the birds, and the birds now are carrying it all over. And we are looking at like a decline in terms of some key species that we do have, which we might not actually be able to see in the near future. So we are struggling with it. We are really struggling with it. Yeah.
It's so sad. And in some cases, it's being shipped off to other countries,
Yes.
again, out of sight, out of mind. It's just so short-sighted.
And it eventually ends up in the oceans, which is because
Linking it back to all of us all over again anyway.
For me, this is the everyday reality that people need to know about as well. Going back to that information and education, this is the reality now.
Yeah, and the reality also being that unfortunately we are having to look for rewards in order to get people to get, involved in the first instant. And the only hope with that is I hope that through some kind of reward, then the reward that you get back from doing it is so amazing that actually you don't need that reward because you're getting the dopamine hit anyway from your involvement and your own responsibility in that. Linus, what about you?
Yeah, it's actually a sad one because my work revolves around community recycling. And this is a case where I feel we are treating the symptoms, but the disease keeps getting stronger. You realize that we normally have weekly or monthly cleanups. Within the same stretch of the beach, you get maybe 800 kgs after cleanup. The next week, you're getting 1 ton or more. So at some point, you begin asking yourself, are we really doing anything impactful? Well, of course, it might provide some, like as you said, incentives to the communities. They sell the plastic, but then when it comes to biodiversity preservation, because like in the ocean, the currents know no bounds. They do not understand that this is Western Indian Ocean, that is the Pacific, or that is there. So in the local context, in Kenya, the production level of plastic has nearly tripled over the past 3 years. So I normally see this as a case of like whenever we talk about carbon offset, where a company is paid to pollute more, and then when now you look at the amount of footprint that they offset, it's insignificant. The same way we talk about now the issue of plastic. The producers are producing more tons and tons and tons, but then there is a law that allows them to be responsible towards the products. They realize that at some point they support a community initiative somewhere of facilitating a few cleanups here and there, and then it is said now this certain company is, in fact, they use it as a marketing strategy. We're environmentally conscious, meaning they sell more. But at the end of the day, is it really helping the environment? So I feel like Hugo mentioned something about values. Like, whatever happens in Japan, if you know that it is wrong, but then you're still doing it for profit or just to exercise your power, because now we are talking about nurturing the kids or the next generation. But the next generation learns more through what we do than what we tell them. And if these corporations are still expanding operations, we'll be still having programs in the universities where the children that we are trying to sensitize to be more environmentally conscious are learning skills to produce more plastic, and they are actually getting jobs in these places. So we might be looking at a future where, like, it is normally say that in 2050 we are going to have more plastic in the ocean than fish. These are reality, because when you look at the effort that environmental activists and a few organizations are putting in place to ensure that plastic is reduced versus the amount of production that is out there, it's like all the efforts are neutralized. And at some point, I feel like as much as we are coming up with innovative ways to recycle the plastic, the bigger problem still lies in production. And the more we speak about this, I think it might have some fruits at some point. We cannot give up, because we cannot say, even if we are treating the symptoms, but then we are lessening the impact. Like in areas we operate, if the biodiversity hotspots, there are species that are threatened by the same plastics, we cannot stop collecting plastics or cleaning those places because the producers are still doing that. So I feel like we can just continue doing what we are doing at our levels, but then also champion for more reforms at the top level, like the plastic treaty. If these things can be put into place, then I believe that all our efforts will be able to help at some point.
But my fear is that if, we're putting all our hopes into the younger generation, it's exactly what you said. So we're about to say, well, the next generation are going to sort it out and we'll educate them. But you're quite right that if we're not providing that example, and then we're still living the consumer life or whatever else, disrespect or ignorance or whatever, that's going to be huge, which ultimately might cancel out all the good we're trying to do in education if we're still not also leading the way. And I think that's the biggest problem.
Yeah, students. Yeah, I think the students, like I said, they normally follow the trends. What is happening, they want to do that, even if you're telling them the opposite, but they still want to do. For instance, there's a company X that I normally use this example. They support cleanups in some areas, and then now they tell their customers that, hey, look, we are environmentally conscious now, buy more from us, and it happens. So when students see that, in fact, some of the sessions we're having, the same students will tell you, we need products from this. We need, if you're giving us, buying some things for us, we really need to have that, because that's what they see on TV. So I really feel like what you mentioned, Penny, it's important. We need to live through that. I mean, and show the right example to them. And in our capacity, I think speaking up also is very important, because normally organizations get victimized, like Hugo was saying, when you speak about these things. But then if you keep doing them within smaller spaces, you are condemning whatever is happening up there, but your voice is not there because you fear getting victimized or getting cancelled. I think the progress is very slow and might not be where we want to go. Yeah.
Thank you so much to Hugo, Mlibo and Linus for sharing their insight and their heart today. To everyone listening, we know these challenges are immense, but giving up isn't an option. Progress doesn't only come from governments or corporations. It starts in conversations like the one we've had here today, and in choices made around the dinner table, in the classroom, and community meetings. If something in this episode resonated with you, please pass it on, talk about it, act on it. That's how change begins. We're Penny and Jenny, and this has been Perspectives from the Informed Perspective. Thanks for listening. And until the next time, keep learning, keep showing up, and keep informing those perspectives.